Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Random Musings from the Clinical Trials Guru. This is Dan Sfera. I've got Chris Sauber on the other side. Chris, how are you doing?
Doing well, Dan. Thank you for asking. And you're always doing well. When's the last time you were doing poorly? So I was going to ask, how are you doing? But you're always
Well,
doing
when
well.
I am, nobody will know.
Yeah, I bet.
Nobody will know except my wife. Maybe not even her.
Yeah, is that true?
Yeah.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah,
Very
I
nice.
try to be a eternal optimist.
That's,
Uh
that's for sure, without a doubt.
That's right. So, this episode is actually inspired by our live stream yesterday,
Hmm.
uh, when we were doing an Instagram live. So everybody go follow me on Instagram, Dan Sfera. And we were asking people, well, what they want to see, and this person kept saying, "I want to see you do a video slash podcast on CTMS versus EDC systems." And so we're going to show you an example of each. Uh, for those listening on the podcast, this is one instance where it might make sense to watch the video. Usually I like audio better myself, but in this case, we are going to be sharing our screens, but we're going to try to explain what's on the screen. So Chris, when you're explaining what's on your screen, just like I will on mine, keep in mind that podcast audience that can't see. Okay.
Sure. But
Um,
but I would change your might. It might make sense. It absolutely would make sense to view this if you can.
right, right. But we know like most who hear this still won't if they're on the podcast. So we gotta try to make it for them too. But anyways, let's start. So these are two things that get confused a lot. All right. Let me share my screen. So the first thing we have is CTMS, Clinical Trial Management System. Right. And that, I don't know why, but that's getting confused with EDC, Electronic Data Capture System. Okay, so EDC is like a CRF, which is a
So
case report form, and CTMS is Clinical Trial Management System.
So yeah, I don't understand that either way. I'd be confused with an EDC, but I can certainly see how it often is, at least from people I hear discuss these things, confused with a CTMF,
Yeah,
right?
so CTMS is something that not every site uses, and it's something that most CROs and sponsors do use, but it's not really like a mandatory thing like a EDC system. For the most part, a EDC system, which is a CRF, I don't know if we already lost you, I'm sorry. You got to buy the book, The Comprehensive Guide to Clinical Research. But basically, when data is collected for a study on the source, it needs to be transferred to a case report form so that the FDA can look at it, and then nowadays these things are all electronic, so they're called EDC, right? Because it's an electronic CRF form. It's also could be called a eCRF. Sometimes EDC is referred to as eCRF, but more often than not, it's referred to as EDC. That's the difference between the EDC system and a CTMS system. EDC is a electronic case report form, which are mostly mandatory for most studies except investigator-initiated trials. And CTMS, completely optional, but it's a tool. So Chris is going to show you the EDC system, but first I'm going to show you the what you're seeing on the screen here is a CTMS system that we are using for our site. Now keep in mind this is just one. Okay, sometimes for CROs, a CTMS system has completely different functionality. But the concept is the same. So the concept is basically to organize the workflow of the study at the site level or maybe at the CRO level. What you're looking at is for our site. Okay, so this is Creo, clinicalresearch.io. They have a really good CTMS system. And I'm in the training one. Okay, so we've got an overview. So basically, it has the sponsor, the protocol number. You can name it internally if you have like maybe 100 studies at your site, you know which one's which, so people don't have to memorize the protocol numbers. Nickname, description. You put what currency because it tracks budgets too, it tracks financials. Status is enrolling, target enrollment. Here's the IRB. Here's a good interview question. What's a common IRB? There's one. You get bonus for watching this video. You get to do well in an interview too. Advera is one IRB. And then a phase 3 tells you what phase. So basically, if you click on these tabs here, there's the overview, there's a
So, what,
subject tabs.
so I have a
Yeah,
question.
Chris.
So under overview tab, what are those links on the side under description? You have indication, drug, key dates, and I'm learning it with everybody else here because I've never looked at this before.
Right here,
Um,
documents, users,
no, no,
external
no.
users.
Under description, under on the left hand side.
Oh,
Left-hand side.
indication. Oh, okay. Indication.
You know what those are?
Uh, yeah, it'll tell you like you can like modify this, what specialty, what indication. So you could put like schizophrenia in
So
here.
what would be the use of this for a site? Or I can't think of why you would need this.
Because if you're at the like if you have like a bunch of studies, and then like you want to look at, okay, this is an overview of this study, but maybe here you just have like the protocol number,
Uh-huh.
and maybe like here you don't know anything, so you go look, okay, this is schizophrenia study, what's the age
Right.
range? Maybe it's like adults, and then what's the age limit? Maybe you could put like 65. And then drug, you can put like what the drug description is, the route. So you could be like oral right here. You can put oral. It's not letting me edit it, but oh yeah, it is now. So you
Okay.
can. It's being slow, but you can do. You could basically. This is helpful for sites that have a lot of studies. And
Okay.
then key dates, like when was the site selection visit? When was the SIV? When were you awarded it? When was the contract received? Contract signed?
So
Regulatory received? IRB approval? I mean, it's actually helpful.
I can see where this would definitely be helpful in terms of feasibility questionnaire. So oftentimes feasibility questionnaires will ask you questions about particular trials, your past performances and past information, and I have no idea what that stuff is, or I'm sure anybody else, most everybody
Yeah.
else has no idea.
So you'd be able to
I'm
upload
curious.
that here.
Yeah,
Like
it's
in
all here.
documents, you can upload that here. Like, for example, let's say you did a feasibility for this study. You just go to documents and then you could upload it, right? And then you have it in there now. Um, but also like the key dates is cool because you'll know, like if you're running the study, you'll know when your IRB is going to renew.
Yeah, great.
You know when the enrollment's going to close. All these things, archiving location, how many boxes. I mean, it's good stuff. It's good stuff here for sites. And it's only as good as how well organized someone's keeping this, right?
Mhm.
But if you have a full-time site director, they should be doing nothing else but this. So it's and if you're a owner, you could log in and see what's going on at any given time. You don't even need to be out on the site. Or if you're a PI. So Creo, we love Creo. Um, here in that you can upload documents like you were saying, feasibility survey. You can upload maybe the budget. Only you are seeing this so far. Only people you allow. Here's the users. I'm clicking on the user tab. Okay. So we have me. They put me as a PI somehow, but I'm not. Uh, and then we have some staff, and then these are the people that look. Now, if I wanted to add monitors or an external user, I can invite them, and I can choose like what they're allowed to see.
Why would you want
Okay.
them here though?
You wouldn't want them here. You would want them like if Creo is also a e-source in addition to a CTMS.
Sure, but
I don't want to
EDC
confuse
side
people
of
too
it.
much. Yeah, I just don't want to confuse people too much, but Creo is primarily an e-source provider, electronic source, but they also offer the
Not the keyboard
CTMS.
side. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just showing them the CTMS, but basically you can add like a monitor, and they can see the source, right? They won't be able to see the CTMS.
Okay.
They won't, they'll have only external access, meaning they're only going to view the source or what you allow them. They're not going to see all this stuff behind the scenes, right?
Right.
So the next tab is subjects. Okay, again, we're in the CTMS. It's going to show you who's in pre-screening. Skittles is at pre-screening. Who's in screening? And then who's enrolled, who's completed, who's screen filled. And you can actually click on these people. So let's say, Kobe, our former employee, who's not a female, but hey, it's 2020. Kobe Sugihara, patient ID, randomization number, screening number, email, phone. The CRA won't see any of this. Okay, this is for the site to see. This is part of the CTMS. So it's also like a database in a way. And then it tells you when there's screenings. So visit 1, then it's going to populate when upon randomization, it will populate, when the other visits are supposed to occur. So that's cool. You have like to-do list. Let's say you have to do, it will tell you like, hey, you have to randomize someone. You have to screen fill. You can upload progress notes. Again, this is a CTMS for the sites. For the CRO, the CTMS would look the same, but the functionality would be different. So there probably would still have subjects here, but instead of showing like what the site needs to do, they would probably show what visits the monitor needs to source data verify. Right? So you always know where you're at. And then there's more tabs to do, progress notes. You could upload things, comments, files, logs, configure. So that's the CTMS basically, in a nutshell. They have like a financial aspect also. I guess I can show it. The budget, it will know what the budget is and it will know what patient visits have occurred. So it's going to tell you, the site, uh, basically what you still have owed to yourself, right?
And
As
it knows
revenue.
these things by what's in eSource, right?
Yeah, it will know either by what's in eSource, or if you're not using the eSource, if you're just using the CTMS, it will know based on when you populate that visit 2 has occurred, visit 3 has occurred.
Okay.
It will populate it that way too. It's just like any software, it's just as good as the input you put into it. Like if you
Right.
buy the CTMS and you don't use it, it has zero functionality. I mean, you know.
Or
It's not
value.
going to do everything automatically for you, but the eSource is supposed to make it a little more automatic, and it does. But if you want to just the CTMS without a eSource, it works too. You just have to manually put things in. And so that's CTMS, and it even shows you like patient stipends, right? Like this is what we owe, this and that. So again, this is a CTMS from a site perspective, all right? But and it tells you like today, no visits today. But if there are visits, it would tell you like, hey, you have a visit right now or coming up, and then visits to sign off on. From a CRO perspective, they would put like what pages the monitor needs to review or what EDC pages the PI needs to sign. So don't get confused with CTMS and EDC. I'll end my screen share. Do you have any questions on that?
I do not. You were a very good presenter there, educator. Very appreciative.
Yeah.
I've never seen a CTMS. This is my first experience too.
Well, you pay the bill and you haven't seen it, so hey.
I do pay the bill. Yes, I cut them a check every month. I've never
Yeah,
seen it though.
literally, you pay the bill for this particular program.
Yep. All right.
Okay, so that's that. But it is pretty cool. CTMS, again, it's not necessary, but it's becoming something that every CRO uses to manage a workflow. And it's also becoming something that most sites are starting to use as well to
Now
manage workflow.
we've talked to lots of potential clients and just people interested in starting their own site. Would you recommend a CTMS for a site that's just starting up and has no studies?
No, but there's schools of thought here. There's one school of thought. It's much easier to train staff on something if they don't know any alternative. So, it would make sense in that argument to start off with a CTMS and eSource if you're starting your first study. and you have a coordinator that's like new or just joining you, because they're gonna have no choice. There's no alternative. There's nothing to switch from. They're not switching from paper. Like, they're just gonna learn it the way it is from the beginning. The
Fair enough.
cons to that is, you're gonna have some upfront costs, although they are minimal. But when you're starting out, everything counts because you don't have revenue, right?
And
So I could argue both.
well, minimal, that's also subjective because I think Creo, their startup, and they're, from what I know, they're in the lesser realm of costs.
Yes.
They're less expensive, but even there, their costs for starting up, I think it's the first study is like a total of somewhere between 2,500 and $5,000. So
Right. Right.
even there's costs, right? So
Right.
it's all relative.
It's
So
all relative, but I could almost make either of those arguments equally well, and it's just a matter of, are you well capitalized or not. I mean,
yep,
uh, if you're bootstrapping it, I probably wouldn't, but I would want to switch as soon as I could afford it,
wouldn't okay.
because it has benefits, like tons of benefits.
So let's say a site's established, they use paper source, they track all of these things in the CTMS, Excel or some other way. When do you think it's ideal for them? Because we've had these calls too. It's getting a
Yeah.
little bit hectic for me here, doing it the way I've been doing it. What do you think?
Well,
10 studies, 5 studies?
my answer would be as soon as you can justify the cost, because the longer you put it off, the more entrenched your staff are going to be in doing it their way, and the harder it's going to be to get them to comply with this new system.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, that makes sense. Of course, you have to keep cost in mind, right? There's cost with everything, and
Right.
there's training as well. So
Right.
implement,
I think the added efficiencies outweigh the costs at a certain point, but
of
you
course.
know, it probably need like at least the study you're enrolling a good amount of patients in.
Yep, I would agree. I would agree. Yeah, I agree with everything you've said, but I would kind of disagree with the starting up because I think the best way, in my opinion, the best way to learn, though I get what you're saying, I think the best way to learn is paper first. We're truly learning how everything works, right? Because you're gonna, good or bad, you may make more errors using paper first because
Right.
electronic EDC actually corrects your errors. It doesn't let you move on unless you correct the error, right? So in that regard, it's great. But I don't know if you learn thoroughly how to work a study if
Oh,
you're
you mean
using,
electronic source?
yes,
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
know. I don't know.
electronic source, it will correct, like, it's gonna fill in the headers for you. It's gonna fill in the dates automatically and the times. Yeah, I mean, but I think that's where the industry's headed anyways. I don't know how valuable those skills are to learn as it is.
True.
Uh, I mean, yeah, some sponsors are still gonna want you to use paper, but we honestly have yet to have a sponsor say that you can't use eSource.
Yeah.
None of them have said that, and it's still relatively new.
I
And I
know we've
think,
had I know we've had clients that have been told no.
well, I guarantee you, post-corona, those sponsors are thinking, why did we ever say no? Because how can we monitor now? Like, it's much easier for a monitor to go log into this eSource than it is
Oh
to
yeah.
beg the site to scan stuff
Oh yeah.
and then
Yeah,
redact
absolutely.
it and then scan and then keep scanning. I mean, and then like the user experience is not as good as eSource. So I think this COVID may have like catalyzed eSource.
No, I wouldn't be surprised if that's true.
I mean, imagine if we were using eSource for the studies that we have as our CRO, right? We wouldn't really have to go to the site.
No, that'd be great. Absolutely.
I know, it would save a lot of gas.
Yes, there would. A lot of time. You get a lot more done instead of driving for 4 hours.
Well, at least we get some live streams to do, Chris, in the car.
Sure.
But yeah, there's definitely advantages. I think more advantages than disadvantages. The only disadvantage really is the cost upfront, and at some point, that's really small if you're enrolling a moderate amount in like 2 studies.
See, I still would argue. I think that you learn more if you use paper. Personally, you got to create the source. There's just so many more
Yeah,
things you have to do.
that's true because Creo, they're so good at their service, they'll create the source for you. Like you give
Yeah,
them the protocol, they'll create the source, but we create source for our clients too with DSCS, right? Like
sure,
you
sure.
can argue that they're not learning because we're doing the source for them. It's
Well,
just
that's
a
their
matter of
choice.
like what they prefer. It's just a matter of saving time, preference. Another positive is I think it allows for more PI oversight because they can log in, they don't need to be at the office and they can see what's going on.
Yeah, that's true.
So
And
I
for a
think the
lot of
good outweighs the bad by a lot in this case.
sites, their PI has very limited time. So being
Yep,
able to do it wherever it's convenient for them, yeah, that's really helped.
I think so.
All right, so should we take a look at EDC?
Yeah, because that's more commonly used in research than CTMS.
Well,
But
you gave us
CTMS is used by just about every CRO uses a CTMS system, but I would say like maybe half of the sites use CTMS.
oh, I wouldn't even. I'd be surprised if it's even that many. But you gave a great presentation, really did, and where I even learned a lot. So I'm sure the audience will. Um, I just
Well, hopefully, yeah,
I
I was
don't.
gonna say hopefully the ones listening uh also feel the same way.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. Um, I mean, if they're watching the video, somebody with a lot of experience is going to watch a video about EDC and CTMS. So it's going to be, I would assume, people that are
Right.
somewhat interested that'll be watching that.
Yeah.
All right. So EDC, here we go. So you can see this, Dan?
Yeah. Yeah, I could see.
Okay. So this is Bioclinica, and you have to bear with me.
We're using this from our CRA Academy. So
And I
this
don't.
is what it looks like.
Yep. And I don't click around too much on this. Only when students have complaints. So let's see.
Yeah, don't mess it up.
Yeah. Right. All right. So let's take a look at Site 400. I think that's what has the data. Right? Subject 101. So okay, let's go back. I guess I need to explain. I got to
I guess,
bear in mind
yeah,
that.
maybe explain what a EDC system is. Like, I kind of did, but maybe repeat it because, you
Well,
have your own way of explaining.
sure. And the simplified version is, let's take the paper source for example. You'll have captured data on paper at the site. That's your original documentation. But you're going to want to be able to provide this data to the sponsor. They want to be able to view this data. They also want a record of it. So you have to input it into a system, and that's the EDC, where it captures all of the data that's gathered. Well, not all, but the primary points that they're looking for, which is outlined in the protocol and the schedule of events typically, that's what's going to be gathered here in the EDC. And this way, it's shared from site to site to site with the sponsor, who's responsible for all this data, and they can review the data, they can do analysis on the data. It's a convenient system for them. Prior to this, it was paper. Everything was, and Dan has actually worked with this. I had never worked with this. I think you started right as paper was dying off, right? The paper CRF.
Yeah, I started right as the paper, like in '05. Let me try to share my camera, see if we can do both at the same time. All right. So in 2005, I started um, in the industry, and it was literally like the first study I worked on was the last study I ever worked on where there was a paper CRF. So from that study forward, there was only EDC after that.
And I can't imagine compiling all that data from those paper CRFs and providing it to the FDA. I mean, that just must have been a nightmare.
Oh yeah, and you never did that, right?
Right? No, I have no experience with that. I can imagine how
Yeah.
challenging that would be.
So here's how it worked. We would write things down in the paper source. We would have never even dreamed of eSource back then in 2005. I mean, that's like science fiction almost. And now it's like, oh, now it's almost like, what are you doing not having it? But back then it was like, wow, it wasn't even a concept. But paper, you wrote down the data on the paper from the source, and then you had a big 3-ring binder with like triplicate, so white on top, pink underneath, and yellow on the bottom, and you would have to press down hard on the CRF. That's how you enter the data.
So the
And
quick
if you made a
question.
mistake, you gotta cross it out like Alcoa. You pretty much don't make mistakes on that, but if you had to, that's what you did. And then the monitor would come review it from the source to the CRF, and then they would rip, like when they verified the pages, they would rip the top two, leave the carbon copy bottom one as for you, and then FedEx all these pages that they're pulling. They used to call it pulling pages, and they FedEx it to the data management, who would get it like in 2 days, and they would then put it in their own system. But yeah, like now everybody, and like a year later, everybody started using EDC.
So did these triplicate ECRFs, did they serve as the source as well?
No, no, you had source just like you do today,
So you
but
had two
instead of
paper
logging
records.
in,
You had
yeah,
two paper records.
instead of logging into EDC, you would just open the big notebook, which was the CRF, and you would, and then if the monitor would query it too, so then you'd have to go in there and change things, and then they would pull it.
So the query would be, hey, you didn't copy this right from the paper source to the CRF.
Yeah. Or like, hey, you're missing headers on the CRF, or a source shows like 150 pounds, but you put 150 kilograms.
Okay.
So that you'd have to like make just the same things they do now. It's just, and they still have an audit trail on the EDCs now, but the audit trail there was just you lining things out.
Sure. Sure. The electronic audit trail now gives time and date and everything else. Whereas
Yeah,
then,
it seems like ancient, but I got lucky to have been involved in one study. And if you count like the times I was interning in summer, like while I was still in college, I worked on more than one study with paper CRFs, but full time one paper CRF study.
and at the time, were you opposed to EDC?
No, I mean at the time I was like everything was happening so fast. It was like if I was a really good like junior high school basketball player, and then you put me in the NBA. Like I'm just standing there looking at everybody running. I had no clue
Right.
what's going
What's
on. So
going
when they
on?
said EDC, I'm like, okay, it
Yeah.
doesn't
What's
really
that? What's
matter.
wrong with it? Right.
Yeah, it doesn't
That's
matter
as
what you
true as
say.
that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But most people did complain. Most people that had experience in,
of course, yeah. Like
yeah,
even the monitors, were complaining back then. I remember like I had an elderly monitor when I was a youngin. I was like 24. One of my monitors was ready to retire, and they were talking about switching to EDC, and she was like, "I'm so glad I'm retiring. I'm not gonna know how to log into these things." So, the same like issues people have with like switching to
sure.
paper to eSource, which goes back to our first conversation with, when would you switch? I
Right.
mean, the sooner the better, because the more someone gets used to something, they just get comfortable with it.
Sure. And I agree. I'm just saying I think it's a better learning tool using paper. That's all I'm saying. Absolutely EDC.
Probably. But
Electronic source is absolutely a better technology than paper, right?
yeah, I agree.
Technology, but
Just be
it's more
careful because you're always one to talk about the slippery slope, which I agree with. And that applies here too. Like the longer
sure.
you go without it, the more ingrained the old ways
Sure.
get, and it's
Sure.
it's just harder to
I agree with
switch.
that. I agree with that. People get set in their way.
Yeah, it's kind of like ripping off a band-aid versus pulling off slow. I mean, I don't know. The extra cost is gonna hurt, but at some point you just gotta do it.
Yep, I agree. All right, so I'm gonna get back to this. So here on the home screen, homepage, we have the sites, and I don't know why, but they're listed twice. I don't know what the rationale is there. I'm not going to speculate. And for the most part, most EDCs are relatively similar. The functionality is definitely similar. Um, but they all work a little differently, right? They all do the same stuff, but they all have like different things you have to click on to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. It's relatively straightforward for most items. The most common, which is Rave, um, it has some things that aren't apparent. They're not
Oh, metadata, right? Metadata
metadata.
rate. Yeah.
Yeah, where you got to click on this like little icon to accomplish something that you do need to do often. It's not real. I think of the word I'm looking for. It's not real straightforward. Not the word I'm looking for, but it's not real apparent how to accomplish certain tasks, in my opinion. Um, I particularly like Inform. I think that's the most user-friendly platform.
Who's the vendor
Definitely,
for Inform? Who's the is that Oracle?
that's Oracle.
Oracle makes Inform?
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, I've heard like people complaining about Oracle. I don't know if they're complaining about Inform too.
I haven't used any of these EDC systems in forever, so they've I'm sure changed. But at the time when I did use them, I liked Inform the best.
Yeah, I
Uh,
haven't used these things in from a site perspective either in a while. Other than that one study we had last year that you had to log in to the
yeah,
EDC. But as a
you're more
CRA, I
familiar
use
with this
them.
than I am.
Yeah, I use like EDC as a CRA once a month at least, and I use metadata and then just a smaller one, the kind of like BioClinica, but something else.
Right. And I mean, it's like riding a bike. I mean, it's going to stay relatively the same. So once you learn it, you can always, with a little bit of clicking around, probably refamiliarize yourself within 30 minutes on how to use it, if that long.
Right, and trust me, they'll have trainings if you're a new coordinator or a new, not even new, if you have a new study, and you're a CRA or a coordinator or a PI or a sub-I, they're gonna give you training for these
Yeah,
things. So
each and every
once you
time.
learn it, yeah, once you learn it, I mean, like honestly, I don't even take the training as a CRA. I do it. I just let the video play. It's like a video, and then I just learn like as I'm using it.
Yep, yep, I do the exact same thing.
Yep.
Anyhow, so you have three sites listed here. Again, I'm not sure why that is. If you were well, this would be more from the CRA's perspective, I guess,
Hmm.
where you can look at different sites. But if it's for the site, it's only going to list your site. If it's like metadata rave, where there's lots of different studies for your site listed there, it'll be by study, not site, because you're a singular site, right? Um, Hopefully that makes sense. So at site level, it'll be listed by study um, as a CRA or I guess a CRO or a sponsor. You would look at it through the sites, right? Which site is this? Um, then if you want to find a subject, you put their information here and find them. Utilities, request blanks, request export. Not really sure what that is. You know what this is? Utilities,
Let me see.
request blanks.
What? Go back. What is this?
Utilities, request blanks, request export, request IPP. Not sure what that is.
Yeah, and you'll come across. That's actually a good point. Like you'll come across these things. Don't be intimidated. That's not even important. I mean, we don't even know what this is, and we've been doing
Yeah,
this for like 15 years.
exactly. And this happens with all EDC systems. Some of the things, the functionality, you may have no clue what it's for, and you don't need to. It's not important, and you're not even taught how to use it in the training session. So
Right.
that often occurs. You'll have no clue what the buttons are for. And you can click on them; it's not going to hurt anything. But it's fine not to know. Anyhow, so let's go on. Click on the site that's populated with information. So this is site 400. Subjects are listed over here. This is pretty common in all EDC systems where the subjects are listed in the left-hand column for whatever given study. Um, and we'll click on subject 101. So, well, first, if you're going to add a new subject, that's what you would do here. We're not going to do that. And also click on the same item here. We'll look at some data. So it's been populated with the visits for this study. So screening visit, and it has the dates of these two visits. And the green check marks, in some systems, that just means that there's data there. And then being that there are no check marks in the other visits, that there's no data there. Other systems will have a green check mark or a red X. And a red X would imply a number of possibilities, right? The visit should have occurred and it hasn't. Data needs to be entered. There's errors in the data. So they have a lot of different ways of trying to display information quickly and easily to the user. You have a status summaries over here that kind of tells you what everything is. I guess the green check mark means verified. So the CRA has reviewed and everything looks good. Could have a red X or something like that too to tell you that there's issues. But, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So clicking on the screening visit. So we have all of the different data points that are collected for the screening visit for this study. You have the visit date, where it's simple, it's just the site populates it with the date. CRA would review the original source or the e-source and verify. I'm not sure how that works. So do you have to still verify if there's an e-source involved? Well, I guess you do if it's not connected to the EDC. So
Yeah, you do. It's like no difference. No
right,
different than.
unless it's connected to the EDC, then you probably don't have to review it, right? Because they do that.
Yeah, they do that. That is rare. We're still because there's some issues with there. I think they're still working things out with the FDA when it comes to passively entering data in the EDC from the e-source, but the industry wants to move that way.
Right. Okay. So, and that's where I was going, and then I realized what I was saying.
Yeah.
But anyhow, so as a CRA, you have to verify from the e-source to the EDC that the data matches still. Just like if the e-source were paper source, you still have to do it the same way.
Right.
So in the EDC, the site would enter the visit date. And again, as the CRA, you would look at the screening visit and make sure for patient 101 that this was the date that it is written on the screening documentation. Demographics, same thing. You're going to go through and enter all this information of the site from what's in the what's in your source, whether it be electronic or paper. This is never the original, by the way, too. You never enter the information here in EDC first. That's a no-no.
Right, because EDC is a case report form. Just because it's electronic doesn't mean it's not a CRF, and the CRF is not a source. That's kind of what the reasoning is behind why e-source don't go directly to EDC now.
Yeah.
But I think that's going to change, but it's still not yet.
So the rule still is that the EDC is never the original.
Right. Although we worked on one study where it was, but I don't want to confuse too many people.
Yeah, that was very odd. I don't think that was appropriate, but whatever. Okay, so I don't know if should I display anymore? I mean, this pretty much covers it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think they just wanted to see like what's the difference between a CTMS and an EDC system, and it's kind of like saying what's the difference between a car and a house. I mean,
right.
It's
There's a lot of difference.
yeah. Although I guess you could have a motorhome, so it's even more of a difference than a car and a house.
So EDC is where you enter the data that's been captured by the site for the sponsor, right?
And the FDA,
Right.
ultimately.
The CTMS, that's strictly for the site.
CTMS is like a tool, for the site to function more properly or for the CRO to function more efficiently. It's kind of like, if you run a business, do you want to use QuickBooks? Like, you don't have to. Nobody says you have to use QuickBooks, but most businesses do have QuickBooks or something similar. So I guess that would be a good comparison. EDC would be more like, hey, the regulators have to have access to this. So this is the data that we're sending them. This is the deliverable. in many
Yep.
respects. What you're
Yep.
looking at here on the screen is your deliverable for the study.
I would agree. I'm just clicking around because I've never really clicked around in here. There's no
Yeah,
inclusion.
I've done it once. One time last year we had to teach some scenarios, and so I actually went through all of it. But yeah, uh,
So again, this just
there's data.
yeah, it just reflects the data that's captured in the original documentation, whether it be paper or e-course. All
Right.
right. Did we cover everything?
Yeah, I think that was good. I think this will be a good episode. So thank you very much, Chris, and thank
Thank
you
you, John.
everyone for watching and listening. If you're listening and still have questions about this, you should probably watch the video. If you don't have questions, you're probably okay just listening to it.
Yep, I would agree.
Alrighty. Well, thank you very much, and we'll catch you all later.